We'll begin with that. We do a lot as far as brand awareness. We focus on the Ark Encounter.
To your point, you don't have to sort of pitch your tour operators on it anymore because they've been there. Their guests enjoy it. They want to come back.
And when we built the Ark in that first year, our attendance doubled, almost tripled.
Hello, and welcome to the Liberty Spenders podcast. We are Kurt and Kristen Luidhardt, your hosts and co-founders of the Prosper Group, an agency that's raised over $500 million and helped elect over 100 members of Congress, 15 governors, 15 U.S. senators, and 1 president. And now, in addition to helping political candidates get elected, we're helping your business get elected by answering this question: what if you could exponentially grow your business by tapping into a lucrative and engaged audience that we call Liberty Spenders? Liberty Spenders are politically conservative or faith-based consumers, and they're looking to buy from businesses and brands that align with their values. If you want to learn more about that, you can also now grab our new best-selling book at libertyspenders.com/free.
Our guest today is Eddie Lutz, who is the Director of Sales for the Ark Encounter and Creation Museum in Northern Kentucky, which welcomes 1.8 million visitors each year. Eddie, we're excited to have you.
Yes, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
And I'm excited about it. Being Kristen from Kentucky and from the Lexington area, depending on which way we come into town, I drive by and I can see the Ark Encounter from the highway. And it's always a really cool thing to see. Also totally unexpected when you're driving along the highway. And I don't think a lot of people, myself included, fully appreciate the scale of what's built down there, particularly between both the Ark Encounter and the Creation Museum. I was geeking out about it and prepped for this episode. I read that the Ark itself cost $102 million to build. So that's wild.
Yeah, that actually is a correct number. And that's what it took when we opened. There's been a substantial amount that has been done since then. We've actually been open 8 years. And the exciting thing is we never stop building. We never stop growing. So there's a lot more there than when we first opened the doors.
Yeah. Well, maybe Noah didn't need some of the bells and whistles you have, but I'm sure inflation's way up since the day that Noah built the original.
It is.
For probably far less than $102 million. I don't know what he would have. That would be an interesting question to ask one day, Noah. How much did you spend on the Ark? Maybe it was all the raw materials were readily available and free labor, family members.
Yeah, I mean, it was a massive project. In fact, some of the stories that I had heard from project managers and some of our upper leadership is really the whole construction industry in the Northern Kentucky area really came to a standstill while that project was being completed, because literally every discipline that you can imagine, from carpenters to HVAC to whatever it might be, were on site finishing up the Ark, which was constructed very quickly. Actually, the entire project from breaking ground to ribbon cutting was less than 2 years to build.
Wow, that is impressive. And when was that? When was ribbon cutting?
That was in July of 2016 is when we actually opened the Ark. So it's been open for over 8 years now.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the date, but I was guessing 5 years, but that just tells you how fast time flies.
Right.
Yeah, and I read that there was some participation from the Amish to help build it.
That's correct. The Ark Encounter, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, but the Ark is the largest timber frame structure in the world by far. Nothing else even comes close. Prior to that, the largest timber frame structure was in Elkhart, Indiana. And it was a very large, obviously, very large farmers market in Elkhart that was built by the Amish. We ended up using the same architectural group to build the Ark. That farmers market was the same height and width as the Ark Encounter, but about 1/3, 2/3 the length of the actual Ark. So obviously the Ark is significantly bigger. But the Amish, primarily in northern Indiana, were the ones who were involved in the project. There were some from the Ohio Amish and Pennsylvania Amish, but primarily from the Shipshewana area, that kind of thing. They came by families and basically did an Ark raising. It was amazing to see.
That's a lot of construction industry folks and also Amish folks out of Indiana, which makes me feel warm in my heart, being a Hoosier myself. I'm also kind of curious about the size, how they determined the size of the Ark. I know we have a basic description of the Old Testament, but obviously some of the terms have been lost to time. How did they decide how big the thing was going to be?
So Scripture gives us the length, the width, and the height, and it gives us that in cubits. Now, what's a cubit? Cubit is from the elbow to the fingertip, and it's usually standardized at about 18 inches. However, what we did when we built the Ark was use what is called a royal cubit, okay, which is elbow to the fingertip plus a handbreadth, 20.4 inches. So when you do the math, what you come to is 510 feet long, 85 feet wide, 51 feet high. Those are the dimensions that we built the Ark. Stands about 15 feet off the ground, uses, believe it or not, 3.3 million board feet of wood that you can stretch from the hills of Kentucky to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So just a massive, massive structure. But that's where the dimensions come from, is from the Scripture.
And I don't think the Bible tells us much about the interior. Of course, there's some stuff in the interior now that, like bathrooms, modern bathrooms, it wouldn't have been in. How do they sort of determine what the interior would look like?
Well, yeah, so that's a good point. So, well, first off, that iconic external image that you see all over the internet, the photos of the Ark, it doesn't do it justice until you've literally stood next to it. And also another thing from the exterior is the dark complexion or the dark facing on the Ark. And the reason for that is it actually has a special acid treatment on it that makes it maintenance free for 50 years, which means it's somebody else's problem. So, but it makes it maintenance free for 50 years. But it also, as it weathers, gets the darker colorization, which is what we wanted, right? So now that we're 8 years in and it's beginning to weather, we have that look because Scripture says the length, height, width coated inside and out with pitch. Now we didn't do that, but we did want that darker colorization. Inside the Ark, and this is the amazing thing, is, I tell people we have 3 levels of world-class exhibits that would make Disney and Universal jealous. And, when I say that, people's eyes kind of lift like, what did he just say? The reason I say that is as cool as that may be, and it is, it's all a facade. This is the real deal. These are timbers that it takes 3 people to reach around. It's just absolutely massive on the interior. When you look at the massive pillars that go from floor to ceiling, the full 51 feet, it's just amazing to see 3 levels of exhibits. But then what's inside? World-class exhibits that would show how Noah and his family might have lived, how they might have cared for the animals, the reasons for the flood, the effects of the flood, and so much more. About 100, if I remember right, about 120 exhibits as you make your way through the three levels.
Yeah, well, it also occurred to me as I was looking into it, and as you describe it, my first impression was, well, you could probably cover the Ark in a couple hours, but probably a whole day experience the size that you're talking about.
It really is. I tell people, and this number is just beginning to widen. I've been telling people since we built the Ark, 5 to 6 hours minimum to really fully experience the Ark. And then I'm sure we'll mention and talk a little bit about the sister attraction, the Creation Museum. Same number, maybe higher at the museum. It's amazing. So what happens, and you mentioned from a business standpoint, what happens is we have visitors who will come and they'll spend a full day at each one of those attractions. In some cases, maybe 3 days to go back and catch what they missed. And it's amazing the impact that it's had on our community. But yeah, you want to make sure that you give yourself enough time at both attractions because there's so much to see and do and so much being added to both as well.
Yeah, that was one of the things that you shared with us. It sounds like there's a big expansion coming around the bend at one or both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually both. I can tell you a little bit about the big project that's going on at the Ark Encounter right now. So, in addition to the Ark, just to give you a quick picture, we have the Ark itself, obviously a large zoo behind it. You can't have an Ark without animals. So we have the large zoo behind it. We actually have a restaurant next to it, which a lot of people don't know, even after they've eaten there, is actually, as far as I know, the second largest restaurant in America. And we did that by accident, just trying to feed people. But it's a 2-story, 1,700 seat buffet. And it's the finest buffet I've ever eaten at. But 1,700 seats, and people, even when they come in and they eat there, they'll see it's big, but they don't get that unless they go upstairs and they see nothing but seating. So anyway, so that's massive. We have a virtual reality experience, huge playground, carousel. We have a 2,500 seat theater auditorium that we use for various events. But the big project that's going on right now across from that theater is going to be a brand new welcome center. So that's where all of our ticketing will take place. There'll be a big bus circle in front of that. And that welcome center will have a very, very Mediterranean feel to it. It'll have a Mediterranean restaurant in it. And it'll really be your welcome to the park, welcome to the experience. That'll open sometime here in 2025. It's well underway, but it will open probably towards the end of 2025, honestly. And then connected to that is really a separate building, a connected building, and that building will likely be done here in 25. But then the follow-on project to that is we are building one of the world's largest scale models of first century Jerusalem as well. And that will be in that building. So, we have, like right now, we literally have 150 3D printers working 24 hours a day with building walls, people, and everything else for this exhibit. So,
let me make sure I heard you say that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
150 3D printers. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Yeah. We have a bank of 150 and they're running virtually 24 hours a day, building out the walls, the people, and everything for this model. That model will be installed into that building sometime in 2026 is when that'll be completed. So that's the big project at the Ark Encounter. So we're really excited about that. We want people obviously to see the Ark, but we want to offer so much more to our guests who come. Now at the Creation Museum, and again, maybe we'll talk a little bit about that, but the big exciting one at the museum is actually going to open the day after Thanksgiving. We are actually opening the largest conservatory in Kentucky. So at the Creation Museum, we have the museum itself, but then we also have our botanical gardens, which are just absolutely gorgeous. And for our guests, it's their first experience when they walk into the park, right? The conservatory will be on the edge of those botanical gardens, and the massive greenhouse, 3 additional greenhouses around it. The primary focus of that, it will not only be the largest in Kentucky, it will be the only one in Kentucky with a permanent display of plants. And that display will be primarily plants from the Bible. And they'll all be curated and explained as to why they're there. Some of them you can imagine, which aren't grown in America, are quite the challenge to even get here. And, so it's a huge project to figure that out. But anyway, that conservatory will open the day after Thanksgiving, and we have our big zoo that we're reopening around that as well. So big projects, lots of excitement at both attractions.
That is exciting. And it makes me want to go back to the beginning a little bit.
Yeah.
And imagine, how did the vision for such a giant scaled project, both the Creation Museum and how it shows off our origins, but the Ark Encounter. How did all that come to be?
Sure. Yeah, that's an exciting story, and it goes back decades. So our founder, his name is Ken Ham. The ministry that's over the Ark Encounter and the Creation Museum is called Answers in Genesis. So it's a teaching ministry. It's a biblical authority ministry. And Ken was actually a science teacher in Australia. And, but beyond, the fact that he was teaching science in a public school system, he was also teaching the authority of God's word from the very first verse. And, he tells the story about going to a natural history museum, and he's standing there and they're looking at a caveman exhibit. And a father says to his son, "Well, son, there's your ancestor." And Ken said it just broke his heart. He said, "Why can't we have a creation museum?" So the original thought, the original plan was build it in Australia. They even had a site that they were looking to build it. Ken eventually came to America and was working in conjunction with the Institute for Creation Research in California. And they're a wonderful ministry, but a little bit different than us. They're more of a think tank. So they do a lot of research, do that kind of thing. Well, Ken is a communicator. So what Ken would do, working in conjunction with them, was he would go to churches around America and around the world, and he would really share the message in a way that people could understand, right? So anyway, long story short, eventually he and two other gentlemen formed Answers in Genesis, and they moved to Kentucky with the idea that they were going to build this creation museum, right? Why Kentucky? From Kentucky, there was two reasons back then. Number one was the greater Cincinnati area, which is where we are. Back at that point, there were some articles floating around that called that area the best place in the country to raise a family. Now, having raised my family here, I can tell you that's no longer true, but it was back then. But more importantly than that, from this location in northern Kentucky, where we are, you are within a 3-hour flight, and we're right by an international airport. You are within a 3-hour flight or a 24-hour drive of 70% of the population of the United States. So if you want to reach the world, you don't do it from Australia. You do it from northern Kentucky. And that's why. So the Creation Museum is actually by the Cincinnati airport, very close to Cincinnati. We hide that airport in Kentucky so nobody can find it. But that's really the hub. The Ark Encounter is 40 miles away, right on I-75, the second most traveled north-south highway in America. And it's just an amazing thing, the number of people that we've been able to reach, not only from the U.S., but literally from around the world. So that's why Kentucky. And what really started that is really what Ken talks about is, and as he gives his testimony, he talks about the fire in his bones to really reach the world, which he's done.
Well, you need that kind of passion, and that was so evident. We had Steve Green on earlier, and his family, of course, has been so instrumental with the Museum of the Bible and running of Hobby Lobby and using those resources for that purpose. And it's amazing, like you said, the dedication and the passion that's needed to pull off such a big undertaking like this, the fundraising that's required, capital drives. I can only imagine. And as you're describing the location, we'd love to hear more from perhaps a marketing perspective. How are you guys driving attendance? How are you helping people to build awareness and to get folks to come and visit?
So I'll begin with several things that are outside of my direct impact. As you introduced me, I'm the director of sales. I'm not the director of marketing, but obviously I work very closely with marketing. We'll begin with that. We do a lot as far as brand awareness. We focus on the Ark Encounter. The way I word it, and I've even worded it internally in the last week, is people come for the Ark Encounter, they stay for the Creation Museum.
Mm-hmm.
And the Creation Museum has been around since 2007, and we had great attendance. We had groups coming. We were making a big impact, and then we built the Ark. And when we built the Ark in that first year, our attendance doubled, almost tripled.
Wow.
Okay. So, it's been interesting over the years. We've actually had to tear out walls, widen aisles, everything, because the museum was never built to handle the number of people that we put through it. And it's because of the Ark. So what that means is the vast majority, not total, but the vast majority of our marketing efforts focus on the Ark Encounter, because that's the draw. That's why they're coming. And then the museum is what they do to fill out their itinerary. The brilliance of that, not only for our ministry, but the brilliance for our whole region, is that people will come for both. And the way I word it, joking around, is our leadership was smart enough to put the two, 40 miles away. They're close enough that you can do them in the same day, but they're far enough away that it's a really bad idea. Right? So what that means is people will come to the Ark. They will overnight in the area, which means the hotel industry in Northern Kentucky is absolutely booming. I work with 60, and I do manage this part. I work with 60 partner hotels, all the way from Lexington up to northern Cincinnati, that are hosting our guests. Okay. So, I work with them. So they overnight in the area. They stay at the hotels. They eat at the restaurants. They take in all the other attractions in the area to fill out their itinerary. So, how do we do that? Our primary emphasis, from a marketing perspective, is name recognition. So, we do a lot of national television. You may have seen our giraffe commercials. It's a giraffe family, and it would be on all over, various cable news and that kind of thing. It's major sporting events. But the technology of that commercial is the same technology that was used in the movie Berenstain Bear. And in that, you have animation within reality. So we have this giraffe family, and we've been doing this campaign for years, and the story just continues of them visiting the Ark and what they experience at the Ark and that kind of thing. Now they're bringing friends too. So there's a llama and a kangaroo. But that's a primary thing. A lot of social media. So our marketing team does a lot with social media. There's a lot with word of mouth, because as you look at various social media posts, the Ark is so iconic that our guests come, they take pictures, they post. And so there's a lot of word of mouth with the friends that also happens online. Beyond that, and this does fall under me, my primary focus is on the group travel market. So, myself, my staff, we will do a lot of national, motor coach bus shows, group shows, really inviting tour operators to bring their groups. This is not only in the faith-based market, because not every guest who comes is a believer by any means, right? I'm working with a lot of secular tour companies who see the opportunity, right? You build an Ark, I can sell that. So that's the thing. So I'm working with tour operators nationally from all over the country. In fact, I'm doing an international show in a couple of weeks as well, but my primary emphasis is nationally. And the good thing about these groups is they come over and over and over again. And then also, because of that, because we're more than just the attractions, I mentioned the umbrella of Answers in Genesis. We're primarily a teaching ministry, publishing ministry. We have our streaming service. We have a whole award-winning magazine and more. So we're doing a vacation Bible school Sunday school curriculum. What we do, that's also a way that we market the Ark in the museum, because as people use our resources, they want to come and see for themselves as well.
What's interesting about what you're describing And why we wanted to ask is, I thought this would be true. You're talking about your marketing and how you're focusing on these group tours. And so again, you have found a way to do this where you've got repeat relationships, so that you know what your funnels are. Again, converting this to this discussion of how we market to Liberty spenders. So how are you building relationships with those groups that are coming in? Are those through church networks? Are you going to conventions, events? What's your strategy there from the sales side to build those relationships?
Yeah, a lot of that is with the convention and events. Okay. So like I said, these are the way these shows work within our industry, within the tourism industry, they're appointment shows. So I liken that, for lack of a better way to describe it, as speed dating. And so I'll set up a show. The big one, for example, is called American Bus Association. That would be the kind of the granddaddy of all the shows. And within that, myself and one of my employees, we will have between us 108 6-minute appointments in one day. And so we're running from
I need a minute
to
take that in.
Yeah. And
108 6-minute appointments.
Right. Between the two of us. So I'll have 54. She'll have 54. And, we'll run to these operators. Now, the good thing is, within the motor coach industry, we've established ourselves so well within the last 8 years. I don't need to sell the Ark in a big way at this point. I used to a lot. I had to explain, here's what we're doing. Here's what we're building. Here's why. But we've established the relationships. You mentioned, I think, that word a minute ago. We've built these relationships to the point that the motor coach operator, if they're a significant motor coach operator, they are already coming to the Ark. So my meetings with them really become facilitating that in many ways, facilitating that repeat business, building upon it. Instead of doing your normal itinerary, why don't you come at Christmas time and let me explain what that can look like for you, that kind of thing. So we do a lot with that, with those motor coach shows. We also do a lot with, and I don't do this as much because I'm here locally, with the Ark and the Creation Museum. But the other employee that I mentioned actually lives in Pennsylvania. So she will do a lot of sales missions where she will actually go out in Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey, et cetera, New York. She will actually go and visit tour operators within their offices as well, where she'll have more focused time with them, to really explain how they can benefit by bringing their groups here. We also will do a lot with some denominational shows and things like that. So, for example, one show that I've done within my team is the Southern Baptist Convention. So we'll be there on the Southern Baptist Convention floor, promoting the Ark, promoting the museum, and also promoting some of our resources as well, tying that all in together. So yeah, and then beyond my department, even there are others in our marketing department that will actually do some other shows that I don't handle directly, just to get the word out and bring guests here.
Underpinning all of this, and you referenced it but didn't say it, I think specifically, is the reason all this works is because the experience is so good, right? To your point, you don't have to sort of pitch your tour operators on it anymore because they've been there.
Right.
Their guests enjoy it. They want to come back. And we talk about that a lot with businesses that we're working with who want to market to conservatives or Christians. And what's funny is this is a little counterintuitive with you guys. I often say, you can't treat your business like a charity. People aren't coming to you because they just want to, support your mission. You got to actually provide a good product. Now, you guys are a charity, but the reason people come back is because the experience is so amazing. Because there's an amazing only in Kentucky botanical experience. There's the world's largest restaurant. There's a giant life-size Ark that you can see from miles away.
Right.
It's not it's a and it attracts people who aren't just there to reinforce their understanding of Genesis. There are people who are there because it's such a great experience. They may not be of faith, like you reference, and that's because it's a good experience. So I think underpinning all of this is if you built something that wasn't, A plus, your job would be a lot harder.
Mm-hmm. Well, two things on that. Number one, I share this a lot. Everything that we do as a message or as a ministry, we do with excellence. And that's really important. So when you look at the exhibits, for example, like I said before, they would make Disney and Universal jealous. That's not just me just talking. It's true. We have one example at the Creation Museum. We have a fossil of an allosaur. That allosaur is one of the top 3 to 5 specimens ever found anywhere in the world. Okay. The skull is 97% intact. You don't find that ever anywhere. Right. But beyond the quality of the fossil itself is the exhibit. I would put that exhibit next to any dinosaur exhibit in the world, and it's going to compare favorably. Iconic exhibits that you've seen, even if you haven't seen them, Chicago Field Museum, the Smithsonian, these exhibits. This exhibit of this allosaur is on par or superior to all of those, right? So that's important to us as a ministry because it's a testimony to the world, right? So that's number one. The other thing, and this is just from a sales standpoint, and I train my team about this all the time. The number one thing for any sales rep in any business is to believe your own story. If you don't believe your own story, you're done, right? I think you've probably gained, as I've shared over, the time we've been together so far, I'm passionate about this ministry. I believe the story. I believe what I'm saying. I believe the truth of the scriptures. But in any sales endeavor, whether it be, an attraction like ours or, selling something at a hardware store, you need to believe your own story.
Absolutely. You need to feel that, that you're authentically there to help the prospect, right? Or the potential consumer or customer. And people can sense when that's not the case. They can sense when, you may not have their best interests at heart. And so I couldn't agree with you more.
I was just curious if now that you've been there so long and you've seen tour groups come in, you've seen visitors, is there like a surprising reaction or something that you see over and over again from people who visit for the first time?
Yeah. The thing about the Ark, we read the scripture, and even if we don't, everyone knows the quote story of Noah's Ark, right? They have some concept. We read the scripture, we think we understand, and then you see it. And that's the interesting reaction. I always tell people there's 2 moments of the day. The first is we have a bus that'll come from the parking lot and will bring us up to the Ark. And at the last moment, you'll kind of make a little bit of a right turn and you'll see it. Everyone on the bus will see it at the same time. And that's actually my favorite moment of the day when I come in to listen to the gasp on the bus. It's that jarring when people see it for the first time. You can actually hear the gasp. The second moment of the day, we actually enter on the right side on the stern end underneath. And when you stand under it for the first time, the reaction that I get from people, I've actually had people that have come to see the Ark and stood there and wept. It's amazing. I mean, that's not everybody's reaction, but that's a very typical reaction. People just can't imagine how big this is until they see it. And, when they go through the Ark, we're going to answer questions that they didn't even think to ask. And so people come away with a tremendous understanding. Believers and unbelievers alike. Seeds are planted. Again, questions are answered. And, but that reaction to the size, people are just blown away. and rightly so.
I know that, as Kurt mentioned at the top, I grew up in Kentucky and still have most of my family there. And members of my family have been, and they have talked about just what you experienced, about just how blown away they didn't know what to expect and the impact that it had on them. Again, even people that, like you said, would feel like they might know the story, understand it. It's just different experiencing it and getting close. It's the same thing you hear when people go to Israel and they visit and they're there, and you can kind of just feel, feel the Bible come to life.
That's exactly right.
And so I imagine it's the same. But again, I've heard specifically from members of my family who have gone and who have described just the incredible impact it's had on them.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Yeah, well, it's been really awesome having you on, and we like to do a little section at the end about just doing some quick Q&A because it's a good opportunity to get into people's hearts a little bit. I love to ask people what legacy they hope to leave behind from their work, because I'm kind of curious for you. What legacy do you hope to leave behind from your work at Answers in Genesis?
Well, several. I mean, I've been here with the ministry a long time. I've served for the last 15 years here, before the Ark was built, a couple of years into when the museum was built. And the growth of our group business in particular has really been all under my leadership. So I hope to leave that legacy. I don't plan to go away anytime soon. I'll work here. I have way too much fun.
Kurt, what are you doing? You writing me off here?
I have way too much fun to retire. So I'm going to serve here as long as they let me. But sooner or later, obviously that day will come, and I hope to pass that legacy on. But more importantly than that is the spiritual legacy. When people ask, well, why'd you build this? It has nothing to do with tourism. Now that's a part of it, and there's a business aspect of it, and we think we're really good at that part. But it's much bigger than that for us. There's a spiritual legacy. We built this Ark so that people would come, see, and bend the knee to Jesus Christ as Savior and Lord. And that's why we build it. That's why we do what we do. So everything is focused on that. And there are so many accounts that have come to me, stories of people who've given their life to Christ when they've walked through. And when it's all said and done, that's the legacy that not only myself, but our whole ministry wants to leave behind.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, powerful. I also am curious if there's something, I give people 90 seconds, talk about something that's not related to your job that's really got your attention lately or you're passionate about. Could be a hobby, could be big Bengals fan. You want to shout the praises to Joe Burrow. What's up? 90 seconds.
I'll mention one and then talk about the second one. So I'm a grandfather. I'm excited for this weekend. I'll have all my grandkids all together for big birthday bash. So I have 8 grandchildren, 12 and under, 12 to 2. And so just following them, all the things that they do is just a tremendous joy. But I'll share one I was thinking about related to this. In addition to my role at the Ark Encounter, I also serve bivocationally as a pastor. I probably will preach about 10, 12 times a year, but I teach every week, but I'll preach about 10 times a year. And for the last several years, I've been preaching through the Sermon on the Mount, and next Sunday is my last one. So that's probably been a big focus, is what God has taught me, through that, of what the Christian life should look like. And especially right now, I'm looking at his authority. As I'm going to go back through the last 2 verses of the Sermon on the Mount, said he spoke as one who has authority. And we're going to go back and look through the entire sermon of where he demonstrated and claimed that authority. And so anyway, that's been impactful for me, is studying that over the last few years and coming to a conclusion and looking to what's next.
Yeah, I once had a pastor who did something interesting. As somebody who's attended church for years, we hear sermons on 2-3 sentences at a time. And I think, and he introduced me to the power of reading the entire Sermon on the Mount together, seeing all the connective tissue there. And it was such a powerful thing for me, because you lose some of the value of it when you don't see how it kind of all moves from one point to the other.
My former, he's the pastor emeritus now, came to me and said, I was going to ask you if you're going to preach on one verse, which he does all the time. But he asked me if you're going to preach on one verse, but I see you are. And so, it's actually 2 verses right at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. And he told me, he said years ago when he preached through the book of Matthew, that's exactly what he did, is he went and reread the entire Sermon on the Mount as a big portion of his sermon. I'm not going to do that, but we are going to go all the way back to chapter 5 and work through all those instances where he showed that authority. So it's going to be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I wanted to do this will make for a good clip for us. What's a quick 60 to 90 second pitch for the entire Ark Encounter and Creation Museum experience?
Okay. So, come to the Ark Encounter. It's the full-scale replica of Noah's Ark, built to the biblical specification, largest timber frame structure in the world. But not only the exterior, but the interior as well. 3 world-class exhibits, 3 levels of world-class exhibits that would make Disney and Universal jealous, showing how Noah and his family might have lived, how they might have cared for the animals, the reasons for the flood, the effects of the flood, and so much more. And it will make the Bible come to life for you. But not only the Ark Encounter. When you come to our region, when you come to Northern Kentucky, come for the Ark Encounter, but stay for the Creation Museum, which will give you a walkthrough of biblical history from the very first verse, culminating in the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's why we do what we do. And that's why we'd love for you to come.
Well, that's awesome. We really are so happy you joined us and talked about this. It's been really fascinating for me. For people who want to learn more, you can get in touch with the Answers in Genesis Ministry and learn more at their website. You can also follow them at Ark Encounter and at Creation Museum at Twitter, now X. I can't get over. I just got to call it Twitter. But thank you so much.
Thanks so much for joining us, Eddie. And Kurt and I have said for a long time that we can't believe we still haven't been. And so I'm recommitting myself to visiting, and I'll have to make sure I let you know so that we can say hi.
Yeah, I'd love to. In fact, if you want, I'll walk you through myself.
Oh, I would love that.
Well, I think the kids would love it. I didn't know about the playground and the animals. That now it's a must do.
So thank you for spending this time with us and sharing your insights and your experience. We really appreciate it. And for those of you tuning in, we thank you so much for listening. We invite you to join the Liberty Partnership community. And if you want to learn more, again, you can grab a free copy of our brand new book out. It's a recent bestseller, which we're excited about. You can get it for free at libertyspenders.com/free. And then most importantly, if you like what you've heard today, if we've provided value, please don't forget to subscribe to the show on your podcast app of choice or on YouTube. Thanks again. Until next time.